Motivation has nothing to do with why people quit their goals in the middle. I'm going to show you exactly what does, and it is going to change how you see every hard moment that you've ever had. Because when you can see the structure of it, it stops becoming a crisis and it starts being information that you can use in the moment. I'm going to take you through this in 5 parts. Each one builds on the last. And I'm going to also bring in real questions from real people in my community, because I don't want to teach this in some abstract way. What we are dealing with is applying this to real life, because as we know, life is going to life. Part 1. What the resistance is actually made of. I want to start with something I've watched happen with enough people now that I can say it with certainty. The discomfort you feel in the middle of a real goal is not doubt. It is absolutely not a warning, and it's not asking you to reconsider your goal. You're bumping up against friction, and friction has a very specific cause. When you set a goal that is genuinely, truly beyond where you've been before, it's what I call an impossible goal, meaning impossible to your current self-image. And by the way, we talked about this in a previous episode, and I will link it in. So you have stepped outside the self-image that has been organizing your results. The self-image is not a concept. It's this living internal structure, and it has been producing your results, your patterns, your decisions, your emotional responses with remarkable consistency and predictability. You can count on it. It knows exactly who you are and also what somebody like you does. And the moment you declared something that was outside of that range, it didn't completely disappear. It actually went to work, and it started to work to bring you back. This is not pathology. This is the nature of self-image. It is designed to maintain coherence, and it is extraordinarily good at its job. The resistance you feel in the middle of something real doesn't announce itself as fear. The way that it may show up is as discernment. It may show up as logical, maturity, pragmatism. It may say things like, I've thought about this carefully, and here's what I actually think. And it uses your history as evidence. Look, it's like it's saying to you, here's all the times before where it didn't work. Doesn't that sound familiar? Why would we want to go through that again? It's trying to protect you back into a range that it knows how to manage. Here's what I want you to understand. The convincingness of the resistance is not evidence of its accuracy. Even the sophistication of the argument that it is presenting to you of why you should retreat, that simply is evidence of how much your self-image has at stake. The more real the expansion, the more the case against it. Here's an example of a client that was really in it, and I'm also going to share my response to her. So she says, I'm doing follow-up emails and I'm getting no response from people who seem so excited about collaborating. 3 for 3. The doubt and old self-image have crept in. I've been thinking about seeking outside different collaborations, but haven't acted on it. The Gremlin is saying, 3 no responses. Are you sure you want to risk more rejection? What I let her know was this, that nothing actually has gone wrong here. She reached out. There was a moment of excitement, and now there's no response. Her mind is trying to turn that into a pattern and make it mean something about her and her goal. 3 people not replying is not a result. It's a moment in the process, but her system is trying to close the loop way too early. It wants to know, did this work or not? Are we continuing or not? And because there's no response, it fills in the gap with doubt. And that is where the Gremlin lives. Not in reality, in interpretation. Non-response is not rejection. It could be so many things. It could be lack of priority, timing, distraction, disorganization on their end, buried emails. It has nothing to do with her value or the quality of what she offered. So we've got to separate these two things. There's her identity, and that stays clean. And then there's her outreach process, and that gets refined. Those are not the same thing. The gremlin wants to collapse them both into one, but her job is to keep them separate. From a process standpoint, she follows up cleanly, simply. A second email a few days later, a third, maybe a week after that. And then you close the loop very clearly. It could be something like, I'll assume timing isn't right for you, but I would love to reconnect in the future. No emotion in it, no story. We just remain neutral. That's clean movement. But here's what matters more than whether those three people respond. Right now, the old identity is saying 3 people didn't respond. Maybe don't risk more. The new identity says this is part of volume. At the level she is moving towards, she is not placing meaning on individual responses. She's building a pipeline. She is reaching out consistently. She's allowing some to land, some may not, without changing how she moves. So the real question here isn't how many follow-ups, it's whether she can continue to reach out without making each interaction mean something about her. Because the moment she stops making it personal, her capacity to create opportunities increases immediately. So of course, yes, follow up, close the loop, and then expand. But it's not happening from force, from understanding that this is actually normal and is part of the process. If she's thinking from her goal, the person with her goal goes through this. What this client is describing, that gremlin voice, is not unique to her. I bet you're saying, oh yeah, I know that voice. It is structurally identical for almost everyone, especially when you're in the middle of something real. The gremlin doesn't care, and it will create new arguments, and it will reuse old ones. It finds the gap, that crack, and it advances. It starts to show you every reason that it's time to abandon yourself and abandon the goal, which is exactly why we need to understand what's underneath it. Because once you can see that, once you can truly see the structure, the gremlin then loses authority. Part 2. 2 identities. Here's something I want you to sit with. When you set the goal, when it appeared to you as real, like when you had that moment, I was just talking about this on my morning call, when you said yes to it, who was doing the declaring? Now, I'm not asking this rhetorically. I'm asking you to actually locate that version of yourself, because that version had access to something. It was connected to something. It was a different internal horizon, a different sense of what was available to somebody like you. It was a different relationship to your own capacity, to what you can have and hold. You see, you cannot see what you fundamentally don't believe is available to you. The fact that the goal appeared, that it felt like a declaration and not a fantasy, means a version of you was already operating from an identity that could hold it. And that is good news, because that identity exists. But it is not always the identity navigating in the messy middle. An older, more practical identity may take the wheel. And it doesn't do this dramatically. It just quietly starts making decisions. You start to shrink, sending out smaller proposals, having safer conversations. You're not really making bold moves. And it wraps all of it in the language of, oh, I'm being grounded, I'm being strategic, being realistic. So it truly makes sense. I want to share another example from my community. So this client says, a month after joining this program, a big future vision appeared. And let me tell you, that happens often. Starting a business in a completely different industry I'm passionate about. It felt so big and unattainable that it became easy to push away. I've taken micro steps, connecting with one aligned business owner, and then one more in the calendar. But I haven't committed things to my calendar the way that I do for my current business. My question is, how do I balance both goals? I also want to move cities by next summer. The timing doesn't feel right, but the dream is not going away. And here is what I reflected back to her. So what she was doing was actually not balancing two goals. She was committed to one and keeping the other at a distance. Her current business goes in the calendar. It gets the commitment, it gets the structure, it is organized. She knows she's going to be placing her attention on it. The new business gets micro steps and qualified language, one connection so far, one more in the calendar. I haven't taken it seriously enough. That is not balance. That's two different identities being given two different levels of permission. The new business keeps appearing because it's real. It is not letting go. And it's not going away because it's not supposed to go away. But she's treating it as something that she'll maybe earn the right to pursue once the current one is stable enough, once the timing is better, maybe when she's moved to this other city. That's the old identity deciding what the new identity is capable of. And from that place, the timing is actually never going to be right. I promise you. From inside that contracted identity, it actually only feels right once you've already decided to move. So the question isn't how to balance these. The question is, what would it look like to give the new business the same quality of commitment that she gives the current one? Even at a small scale, even with a different volume of time, not equal time, but equal seriousness. Because the moment it goes into the calendar, something shifts in how her nervous system will relate to it. It stops being this dream that she is protecting, and it actually starts being something that it has a direction and she's actually moving. So the dream isn't going away because it's already hers. And the work now is to start navigating from that identity, even before the external reality caught up. And frankly, even before she has it all figured out. Remember what I say, the how is none of your business. The question isn't how to get back to some elevated state. The question is, what does the version of her who declared this goal know that she's not currently letting herself access? That version isn't gone. So that's why I was asking you about the two identities. The work is to locate it, to connect back to that, and then make the decisions from there. Part 3. Evidence addiction. I want to name something that I almost never hear discussed directly, even though it is one of the most common ways that genuine expansion collapses in the middle. At some point, when you are in an impossible goal, you start waiting for the results to tell you whether you were right. Now, you may not call it waiting. You may call it assessing. You may call it, I don't know, maybe staying data-driven or being responsive to what is actually happening. But what is really occurring is that you have started looking for external confirmation before you will allow yourself to feel solid internally. You're watching the numbers, you're looking for permission and evidence to trust the direction. And because the results of something genuinely new have not arrived yet, there's actually nothing to confirm. You don't have that yet. And so you actually keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And this is what I call evidence addiction. And it is almost universal. Everybody goes through it when you are in the messy middle. Here's another real example from my community. So a client says, I can clearly see how much I've grown internally in my thinking, my boundaries, my self-awareness, but I still feel resistance around visibility and belonging in rooms with high achievers, especially because my external results haven't fully caught up yet. What comes up most is an internal pressure to explain myself. My nervous system reacts as if my worth and safety are tied to money that hasn't arrived yet. How do I stop tying my sense of belonging and confidence to external results that are still catching up? Okay, here's what I said to her. What she just described is evidence addiction in its most vulnerable form. And I want to honor the precision with which she named it, because most people can't see it that clearly when you're inside of it. Okay, so here's what's actually happening. She has done significant internal work. Her thinking has changed. Her standards have changed. Her self-awareness has expanded, and she can see that. But she is still looking to the external for validation, specifically when it comes to income. She is waiting for the money to arrive before she will allow herself to feel like she belongs. And in the meantime, she walks into the room carrying the weight of what hasn't happened yet. And then it's seen as a gap between her and the people around her. And here's how it shows up in the room. Through her question, we can see she's trying to belong in the room through explaining her journey, qualifying her path, preemptively answering questions that nobody has asked, but already thinking about the answer. So this is an identity issue. The identity that walks into that room is still organized around what she doesn't yet have, around a lack and the gap, rather than around who she has already become. She's extraordinary, let me tell you. The shift isn't waiting until the income arrives. The shift is deciding in advance of the evidence that the internal work that she has done already qualifies her to be in that room. And not as someone who is still figuring it out, who's still becoming, but as someone who is. And then letting that decision organize how she walks in, how she speaks, and what she stops needing to explain, quite frankly. Here's the thing. What you're being asked to do in the messy middle is hold an internal reality before there is any external reason to. You have to operate from the new identity while the old results are actually still showing up. The stability has to come from the inside, and then eventually, inevitably, the outside catches up. The question is not, is the evidence there yet? The question is, are you willing to stop outsourcing your internal certainty to circumstances that haven't resolved? It's not a matter of blind faith, but what we're talking about here is authorship. And we're going to get to authorship in part 5. But first, part 4. Standards versus pressure. I want to make a distinction here that I think most people are living inside of without having named it. Because in the messy middle, it feels like the same thing from the inside, but it produces completely different results. There is a difference between operating from standards and operating from pressure. Pressure is external. It comes from the clock, the quarter, the gap between where you are and where you said you would be, the awareness of, oh my God, who's watching? People are noticing. Pressure reorganizes behavior through contraction, and it creates a false urgency and this low-grade fear, anxiety, and anticipatory anxiety. And people who are often working from pressure look really busy, and they're often exhausted. They mistake activity for progress and the exhaustion for commitment. But standards are different. Standards are internal. They come from identity. They come from a decision about who you are and what that person does, independent of whether the external circumstances are cooperating. Someone with a genuine, solid internal standard doesn't need external pressure to move or to maintain it. They hold it because it's who they are. And that brings us to part 5, authorship in uncertainty. Everything in this episode has been moving towards this. And I want to say this really clearly. This is actually not the most complex idea. It may be the simplest, but it requires everything that came before for it to truly land properly. Authorship means you are the one that's writing the story. You're not reacting to it. You're not waiting to see how it turns out. You're not managing whatever reality shows up and then deciding how to deal with it. Authorship means that you are actually shaping the reality that you desire to experience. Think about it. The author doesn't wait for the characters to do something interesting before writing the next chapter. The author is deciding what happens next. Now let's bring this to the messy middle, because in the messy middle, the pull is towards one of two things. The first is gripping, over control, hyperactivity, trying to force outcomes, working from the anxiety that if you stop pushing, it will all fall apart. And the second is collapsing. Maybe you go quiet, pull back from those boldest moves, telling yourself you're being strategic, responsible, when you're actually just waiting for something to confirm that it's safe to move again. And you're not putting yourself out there because you don't want to be rejected. So neither of those is authorship. Authorship is a third thing. The people who get through the messy middle and get on the other side of that are not the ones who had more certainty. They're the ones who understood what was happening structurally. And from that understanding, made a decision to keep writing their story. Not because the evidence told them to, but because they already decided who they were. That decision is available right now, in this moment, not when the results confirm it, and not when you feel better, but actually right now, in the middle of not knowing, in the middle of not seeing all of the evidence. The authorship is there if you choose it. If something in here named an experience you're having, I would love to hear about it. I love it when I have people that have just listened to the podcast, they're fresh, and then they slide into my DMs. And the best place is Instagram at Coach with Hina. And if you know someone right now, like you know they are in the messy middle of something and it is so real and they are in it and they are going through it, will you share this with them? And it's not to motivate them. It's just so they know what the heck is going on and so they can actually see it. And you know what to do. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. You know, that really makes a difference for us. And I truly, truly appreciate it. It allows us to reach more people. It affects the algorithm. If you're listening to this, rate, review, download. That makes a really big difference as well. I appreciate you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here truly. And I'll see you on the next one.